tried to call on him first because I knew he only had one written down.
Yeah.
And so I was like trying to give him a little bit of confidence in himself because he just struggles.
Yeah, and I actually really appreciated so much how you did that for him, and I know that he did too. When you came by and were just like, what are you thinking? Like, you checked in with him very briefly, and it's like, just write something down. I actually think he might even benefit from just a little bit more.
Okay.
Like, feel free to give him, and be like, hey, I know this is hard, but I actually know, like, you can do this, so I'm going to let you know I am going to call on you. Putting that out there for him and letting him know, I am confident in you, as such you should be confident in yourself. I think you're totally right about the fact that it's an absolute confidence issue, but in order to get him there, he has to have somebody who is confident in him, not just pushing him to do the work, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but no, I really think it's exciting because I know we talked about rigor and behavior management last time. Both of them have come a long way because I think in terms of behavior, you've got investment, and actually I think that comes from a strong level of rigor. The way kids are responding to the text and how they're engaging with it was so different from last time, and they were having a lot of fun. So I think it's really cool, and I actually want to take a minute to, could we go over the do now sheet and kind of guided notes that we had today, and then we'll talk about writing. So I just want you to take a minute though, because I want to celebrate a lot of parts of this, but I also think there's ways that we can refine this. What do you think was most successful about this kind of setup and framework that you provide that kids clearly learn the most from?
What do you mean? Can you clarify that?
Yeah. How you set up your lesson today.
Okay.
Almost going through the questions, where do you think kids were learning the most as it relates directly to what you were intending to teach?
Okay, well, when I'm trying to get my students to start doing with Lord of the Flies, is really work on close reading skills.
Mm-hmm.
So yesterday we focused a lot on diction with setting and how that affected the mood. And then today we were just talking about how I wanted them to understand how certain words, certain diction to describe Jack, affected the way we view Jack.
Yeah.
And so, but also just because it's kind of we've done analysis before, but it's the first time I've really emphasized close reading skills, and so I'm just trying to get them to feel confident with it, where it's picking out words and stuff, where they feel it's they kind of feel it's easy at first, oh, this is easy, I'm just picking out these words, and something I can do, and then taking them to that next level of okay, now what do we do with these words, and how do we use that to do deeper level analysis?
Yeah. So I really saw that in this first question. You're just asking kids find language that gets to it. Now I will say there was one thing that I think could kind of take it to the next level: the clarity around diction,
Okay.
the sheer fact that that was your objective, and we talked about it here, but there was never kind of a synthesizing moment where kids or you kind of pulled it together and said, do we see how the diction, his word choice, and these words that were showing up here are ultimately creating this dichotomy that blank. It's almost you got them working so much that we forgot to almost take all the work that they were doing and put it together into one big thing. So I think you were right in your flow. This is a good starting place. Just let's get them describing. And then this is a good description analysis kind of piece. Based on this, what might this mean? So what I saw is so then kind of taking from that, where's the kind of objective being hit? In this first question, the second question.
Wait, what?
Sorry, that's kind of that's a very big question. In a way, if we're asked the ultimate
the first question gets us to the second question, which is what I wanted. I wanted us ultimately, because we were focusing on dichotomies, and so yesterday we were focusing really on utopia versus dystopia.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I gave them that dichotomy, and then we took it apart and analyzed it.
Yeah.
And this time I was trying for them to create their own dichotomy by looking at the characters.
Yeah. No, I understand, and actually that's the whole point of this is I saw that, and I love where it's going. But the ultimate question we're asking this is this is kind of the preface. This is what they'll need to be able to do this.
To do that, yeah.
And so what I'm actually, the rigor that I'm kind of pushing you for is almost, what if you presented that question itself, independently of that? You did that with them. But what if you asked a kid this right now? Would they know to do this on their own? will they need to be able to?
Yes.
Yeah. So the idea is now kind of shifting them out of the structure so that way they can take a question like this and do it independently. Yeah. So that's about where we're just getting like really in refined skill and technique.
Okay.
And then actually just don't be afraid to ask this question. If you got rid of this, but maybe when your lesson, when you actually go over it, you just ask kids, well, how did you go about answering this question? What did you do now that you've taught it? So, like, let me put it this way. If you were teaching this lesson specific to, like, okay, we're going to show how we can submit to the objectives you're going for, how the actual diction will allow us to interpret a specific, like, symbol or way that we can view Jack. You teach this way. The next time you approach this, remove it. So that way the expectation is that you do that. Yeah.
That makes sense.
And so that's similar to here, because I loved this. So tell me, like, what were you thinking when you made this? Because I thought this was a really strong focus on, like, one, it hits the dichotomy aspect very well, and then two, gets them thinking in a very, like, logical reading comprehension kind of way.
Yeah, I mean, I knew where I wanted them to go, like, where I wanted them to ultimately get. So I just thought of, like, the questions that would lead them there, and I knew I wanted to either do some kind of graph or something that would, like, emphasize the comparison so that they would get that idea of dichotomy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just kind of made the questions up as I was going and trying to go kind of in order of the text as well.
Yeah. And I think, like, you picked some really key target areas. What do you think made kids struggle the most here?
Maybe just a lack of understanding, like, of what motivation is or how to discover motivation.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, because one thing that stood out, I kind of checked these questions on, like, Bloom's, and because this was very much like, we're asking them for reading comp, so it's like, identify. This was a mix of, like, identify analysis. This was analysis, and this goes back to identify.
Yeah, and we do TLI here, and, like, one thing on the ones that my kids tested on, like, the analysis was so low.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I definitely think that's partly where they struggle. And, like, the reason I really wanted to focus on, like, close reading with this text is because I feel like it will help them with their analysis skills, and also because they think the text is boring.
Yeah.
which I actually get. Like, if you just read this text as, like, a boys on an island, it is very boring.
Yeah.
I think that, but, like, I do, but, like, I love this book, and I love this book because of the double meanings, and, like, that's what I'm trying to get them to see, like, it's an allegory, everything's a double meaning, everything's symbolic, and if you start to read it that way, if you start to read these, like, long, like, passages describing the island that just make you want to be like, oh, I don't care, but you start looking at, like, all the double meanings, then it becomes interesting.
Yeah.
And you're doing analysis while making your book more interesting.
And that's such a great approach to take. Like, that's what kids are interested in, and people don't often, like, remember that. So I'm so excited that's your focus. It's great. And so what I'm thinking is, like, that's why we really want to take this almost to the next level and just ask the analysis questions. Okay. We have to get them out of reading comp. We know that they struggle with reading comprehension, and we want them thinking about that. But we really want them doing it independently because, like, I was thinking about this last question. It's a great question, but what would take it to the next step that would force them almost, just add on something to the end of this, and you'll realize kind of where I'm going with this in a second, that would force them to do this independently.
Like, if I just ask question 4?
If you take question 4 and kind of, like, amend it a little bit, so that's going to force them to do this independently without you having to force it.
Like, I guess I could just tell them to go back and look over those pages.
Or, what dichotomy or dichotomies might Jack and Ralph represent? Use textual evidence to support their answer. Like, it's such a small, like, little line, but then
they have to go back and look.
What kind of, like, okay, but also, how many, like, this could be a few word answer. Imagine what kids are going to be doing when you ask them to, like, use textual evidence to support your answer, like, quotations, and, like, actual text-to-self, text-to-text, like, relationships that are kind of going on. True structural analysis. And then you don't have to provide these things. So then, but if you do, you should very much teach it as, like, these are the questions you need to ask yourself in order to come to a question like this and understand it fundamentally. And so then you do the same kind of thing with this, of just like, maybe ask that question like, how would you approach this? And you're waiting for kids to say, well, I'm going to look for the times that, first I got to figure out what the dichotomy is for Jack, be like, good. Okay, got to figure out for Ralph, good. What are you going to do to use to figure those out? You're going to ask subsequent questions, but never in a way that's like so explicit that kids feel like I'm answering this because it's a question on the paper. They're like, I'm answering this because I need to know it in order to reach this final outcome. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. And that's what brought up in my mind of like kids writing. Because when you were going around seeing student responses, like how much were kids kind of saying in this?
You mean like how
much writing were they doing?
No.
Yeah. From what I saw and like, you know, kind of engaging with some of the kids, very short, curt answers. They're just like, I'm answering this because I need to answer this. Not because I'm like looking for the value behind it. And so I was wondering, and we've kind of gone through writing before, is it normally like that? And that's why I think like seeing previous writing.
We usually do like, I feel like in class to class, we usually do things like this. And then at the end, like the culminating thing we do are like responsive literatures.
Yeah.
And that's where they have to like use textual evidence and write like paragraph responses and stuff like that. So it's usually like a build up, like what was my plan basically for this is like to build this lesson up and then have them do a responsive literature that is similar to this, but they kind of do it on their own.
Do you think, and because one thing I get very curious about is, in my mind, and I was an English major in college, but this is just kind of how my mind works, reading and writing are not separate. I have always found them very ingrained, but what I have noticed a lot in classrooms is that, for, you know, either students kind of see those as very separate, but often when I see that students see it as separate, teachers are often teaching it separately. It's like, this is writing time, this is reading time, instead of like, English is about both and how we integrate those. How would you say, like, do you think that you integrate writing with your reading strategies, or do you think they're kind of like separate? Do you have like reading days and writing days, or like, how would you say you structure it?
Probably more separate than together for sure. Like, and it's not necessarily like reading and writing days, but like, okay, we're gonna read, now we're gonna write in response to our reading. But they are.
Your kids gotta go. These kids always go like, about writing.
Every time, yes.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah. So they seem disinvested from writing.
Definitely.
Do you think that's influenced kind of like this structure? Like, I know they'll do this, but they might not write, or is it just because this works and that you're comfortable with?
I guess because like I try to think like I don't want to like what I'm trying to focus on and like trying to teach them analytical skills by stepping it out for them first before like throwing them to do it by themselves, and then like being like I don't want to focus on writing right now, I guess.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so that kind of gets back to this, is just like, I actually think keeping the structure the same is exactly what you should do. But then when you get to this final one, you actually expect a paragraph answer.
Yeah, that's smart, yeah.
And so the way that we do that is we're actually showing kids reading should be about getting the basic understanding of it, analyzing it, and then being able to come to a reasonable conclusion with it. And so I think like that's why I'm excited about like this kinds of stuff, because it's getting them there, but we need to have that final culminating question that get kids writing and I think like by that point their confidence will be up. The great thing about this is you build them to like the responses here when they're just like, let's talk about good versus evil, savagery versus civility. Like I was like, what, 9th graders, you're so cool. And I was really excited for them. If they could write a paragraph, an essay on that, they would nail it on the ACT tab. And because it requires them to learn to stop, think, organize your thoughts, and communicate them in a way that's not ABCD, which is going to be what they have to do.
Yeah.
So, I'm also being really good about action steps. And so one thing I really want to prioritize is also kind of pushing for this. Would you be willing to kind of send me your next assessment? It could either be like a guided note section just like this, which I think actually would probably have the most value, so it shouldn't be super long, or whatever next assessment you're going to use, where we kind of see that scaffolding of like getting kids starting thinking on the comprehension level, but ending them on like true analysis that we think is going to kind of get them to the, okay, when do you think, like, when would be most beneficial for you to work on that? Do you want the weekend? Do you want, like, sometime next week that we can kind of have this due?
Let's see, what do you think about this? And probably we're going to read chapter 4 in the I just recently got more books, so up until now we've had to read everything in class, which is a time suck. But like, so we're trying to get through chapter 4 this week, and then we're gonna really start talking about like the character of Simon and stuff. So I feel like, yeah, I think that's where I'm gonna go next with it. So probably late this week or early next week.
Okay. Well then let's just say like. Let's say early next week. So let's say you send on by Friday. Okay. We can do Friday or Saturday. I don't mind working on Sunday. I always work on Sundays. So let's go ahead and say Saturday. Saturday at midnight, send me the your guided notes that you're going to be doing. I'll provide feedback on it Sunday, kind of get it to you early afternoon so that way you can do any tweaking and that way we can push for it. And then what I'll do is also follow up with you on like Tuesday or Wednesday and basically being like, how did kids actually respond to this? Were they more invested? Were they more engaged? And of course we can touch base about Michaela and see like, do we see any kind of strategies like this working? Yeah, and I think like that's a really good priority because I see kids who are interested in it, like they like to act up about reading, but I actually see a level of interest that they have in the book now that it's actually starting to like, it gets good.
Yeah, it does get definitely. Good. Chapter 4, lots happened.
Yeah. And so I'm seeing it. There wasn't ever a time that kids were just like refusing to read, Troy being the exception just because of his confidence. So I'm thinking like it should pick up. Getting them kind of with the writing element too would be good. If you want to get kids really reading outside of class too.
Yeah, I just got some books from the middle school. Awesome. And so now I'm just waiting on a few more and then I'm going to deal them out.
Yeah.
We're going to start doing some reading outside of class.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think that's the right thing to do. Make it like, is your priority, if your priority is to get them to read, how are you kind of structuring that? Are you just telling them, go home and read these chapters? Do they have an assignment with it?
What I've done with my other classes that have a book of their own, like, not Laura's lines, but like my preview class and stuff. I have them annotate it with Post-it notes, and then they have comprehension questions, and I just let them know.
Gotcha.
And usually, like, the chapter, they're supposed to have read it before the comprehension questions are due, and I give them, like, a couple extra days to get those in.
Gotcha.
So it's just, like, a check.
Yep.
Or, like, every once in a while, like, with my seniors right now, like, they have an active Hamlet due that they're supposed to have read by tomorrow, and we're just going to, I told them, we're just going to take a quiz, like a quick just reading comprehension quiz at the beginning of class, is just to check that you read it.
Gotcha. So your priority is, I just want you to have read, and really the assessment is just, like, because I need an accountability measure to see
basically, like, I just want them to,
good.
like, I'm fine with doing, like, analytical stuff in class and stuff. Right now I just want to get it read so that we can then talk about it and go back and, like, really delve into, like, today, like, we got to go back and read certain passages that we already read, but, like, look at it in an analytical level. So, like, I want them to have it read and understand it. Here's what happened. Now we can go back and do close reading and, like, look at this paragraph and look at this paragraph and really start to, like, pull it apart. Yeah, no, that makes complete sense, and I am really glad that, like, your focus on the class should be about the analysis, and I think the reading here is not bad, but I also think, like, having kids rather than giving them structure, like the close reading, should be the priority. Obviously, you don't want to have to turn them over all the time to, like, okay, now take 20 minutes to try and read as much as you can of the chapter. That's obviously, like, a little bit difficult, so I think one thing that you can also do is, like, really build the investment in it is, if annotations are just, like, the accountability check, we can continue with that. But what I really recommend is turning them over with a simple writing question, and maybe just get, like, if they all have a composition notebook, for example, and just all they have to do is, every night, they take a question home that deals with things that are really, like, exciting to them, pertinent to them. The way they talk about utopias and dystopias in here would be really cool, and I just wonder if, like, you asked a kid, okay, your expectation is to read this chapter and answer this single question in a paragraph. What makes you think that Jack might represent, like, a dystopic society in here? And they just, like, answer it in a way that, if they're interested in that. Or maybe you make it a personal relationship. Who do you more identify with and why? Like, that's a really cool... Use examples from chapter so-and-so that they're supposed to read to do that.
they're going to actually like be a little bit more invested in that than if it's just like the annotation, and it gets them to this idea of writing and synthesizing and analyzing in a way that's meaningful to them. So just something to think about, but I think the priority around I really just want you going home and reading is good because the reading seems to be a big struggle. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I'm excited about where this is going. I do want to take a few minutes and talk data with you. Okay. Just because, I mean, listen, I absolutely trust you, and part of the reason is that, like, what kids are doing in here is strong, especially for a first-year classroom, but we're at a point that, like, do they know what they are and are not capable of doing? And that's my priority with data. Okay. And I also want to be in a place that we can say, like, hey, we know kids are doing this well, and we know they're growing this much, but, you know. So I'm just wondering, like, how is tracking going? And actually tell me about what kind of tracking systems you use. And if it's like, I make piles, that's fine too.
So the reading, gosh, I'm terrible at tracking. I mean, I track their independent reading, but that's just whatever. Yeah. And they have to get on to me about that all the time. Yeah. Where's my star? But
I like your kids do that.
Yeah. And then we just took the only reading I really do is the Gates begin to use,
which I think is fine.
Yeah, and they took that last week, and I just have to finish grading it because their kids' absence, so I had to get them all caught up. Writing, I just usually, I don't have an official tracker for my writing. Yeah. Like, I usually just eyeball it and or I'll on our like Edline or grade system, you can run summary reports. Yeah. So I'll run and see how many, here's what they averaged on this one, here's what they averaged on this one. But because it's teaching is such a learning process that I don't always feel like growths and dips have to do with their writing abilities, but more as how well I taught that objective or how well I structured that question. And then there are certain things there are certain kids I can pinpoint and see where they're growing, and then there are other kids that I'm just like, oh my goodness, we still are writing 3 sentences for our culminating focus question, and so
that makes sense. So it's almost like
there's no really good official tracker.
Yeah. No, and I actually want to kind of take a little bit of flack on my end. I love data. Data's my buddy. I made it work in my class, and my kids are actually invested in it. I find data can be really investing. But the problem is that I think how I've communicated that to you is tracking. And those are two actually very different things that even I'm like, Kyle, check yourself. Because it's about really communicating to kids, where are you in an effective way, but also giving you a kind of strong measure of how kids are doing. So the reason that we have the tracker is because we're doing it. Additionally, we need it because, externally as well, we want to be able to say, kids went from here to here, and having a firm understanding of it. But the really important part is, are kids working with the rubric? And so would you say, when you're grading kids, if you give a kid an 80%, would you say they're actually hitting that on the rubric?
Yes.
Yeah. And so then that's tracking.
Okay.
And so, but the thing is, then if you can articulate that, and almost the idea is if I went to a kid, and I said, listen, Michaela, I see you got a 70. Why do you think you got a 70? Do I want her saying, well, I made a claim, wasn't exactly on point, but it was kind of getting there, or, didn't have structural data, basically being able to articulate the idea of the rubric. That's what's going to be the most powerful thing. And then if I asked her, what do you need to do to improve, and tell me using specifically, your writing. And she can actually, I don't even care if she's just sitting there and looks up right there and goes, I need to do a better claim. I need to find appropriate textual evidence. The idea of tracking is really just telling kids, this is where you are, this is where we need to grow, and this is what, this is what's holding you back, and this is how we could grow. Once kids are there, they have all the information that they need. It doesn't have to be plugged into a tracker. Okay. So even for my sake, if I know that you're using the Delta rubric, and you don't want to do it on the growth tracker, you don't have to. I recommend it highly because of the fact that
Is there a growth tracker for the Do you mind if I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Is there a growth tracker for writing?
Yes.
Okay.
There's,
I didn't know that existed.
Oh my gosh. See, this is why I'm sometimes a terrible at PLD. Yes, there is. It's all outlined in that email that I sent you that has like, this is all the things that you need to track. But it's on the ELA website. It's response to literature tracker. I'll also send it to you tonight. Okay. And what happens is, you just put in all your students on the left-hand side. For every writing thing that they do, you just put it on the top column. And then you just give them anything from a 1 to a 4 on the rubric, and it tells you like what the overall average is.
That's cool.
And allows you to see, and it allows you to see growth over time of your classes. So I'll send it to you. I'll also send you an example one, so that way like you have a frame of reference for doing it. Okay. And then actually that's all the tracking that I would need, but I think like those are the most valuable pieces. We want to know how kids are growing in writing. We want to know how they're doing in terms of reading. And that's really what we're going to do.
And I have the reading growth one. Like, I have that one.
Oh, I know.
But, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah. Okay, that'd be,
And so that's all, and then what we're going to do. But then also making sure, like, still going back to that priority of, if it's fine if we put it on a tracker, the priority should be our kids.
And I agree with that. I asked my kids the other day, we did a response to literature, and it's like, the first one, it's like the real, well, not the first one, but the real first one.
Yeah.
Since we've been back, so we like went over it, and I asked them, what's the first thing you need? None of them could tell me. They were all like, well, we do RAGE, like the little acronym RAGE. So they were all like, restate the question. And I was like, okay, well, you're doing RAGE, so let's do that real quick. And I was like, okay, answer the question. And I was like, what are these two called together? No one could tell me. I was like, it's a claim, it's your claim. And it like killed me.
That's so funny.
And so I think that's definitely something I need to work on, because they don't know that language, and they don't. So it's obviously like, if you can't articulate it, then you don't know what you're doing wrong, so you don't know how to get better.
One thing, like, simple thing that actually takes very little time, when kids are kind of working on, like, essays, definitely for longer term things, print off 2 copies of the rubric. One for themselves and one for a peer. You have 3 minutes. Go through this essay quickly, skim it if you need to, grade yourself. Turn it over to your partner. Your partner has 6 minutes, give them more time to read the full essay. They're going to grade it. Circle it on, and they're just circling on the rubric. And then, when the kid gets it back, just have them answer in 1 minute 2 quick questions. Why do you think, what's the difference between your grade, the grade you gave yourself, and how other people grade you? What do you think you'll need to do to up either one of those grades? Those kinds of questions just there. Absolute 10 minutes of reflection, but then next time, like if you do that consistently, every time you ask, what's missing? Kids will be able to say, claim, textual evidence, like actual support, strong details. They'll get to a place that they can communicate that, but if we don't allow the time for them to engage with the rubric, they'll never retain it.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. I'm with you, but I'm so, like, Dr. Crosby's right. You were doing some awesome things the first year, so keep it up. I'm so glad to see how kids are analyzing this text. So glad that, like, this, one thing we talked about before is, like, would this 9th grade class be prepared for your 12th grade class? I'm leaving today feeling like your kids in this 9th grade class would blow your 12th grade class, like, to pieces in a very positive way if we keep up with this kind of level of rigor. So, that's for you.
Thank you.
You are a champion. I enjoy coming in here. And thanks for letting me videotape.
Oh, no problem.
It's,